So very few people have had a chance to try out the new Canon R5 Mark II or the brand new Canon R1. And those that have had very little time with them. But there are a few photographers that were given pre-release bodies to use at the Olympics. And today we're going to talk to one of them about what they thought. Let's go behind the shot. Hi, welcome to Behind the Shot. I'm Steve Brazill. This is the show where we try and get inside the mind of great photographers by usually taking a look behind one of their shots from conception to completion, all those stories and challenges that happen in between. But today's going to be a little bit different. You can find a blog post associated with this particular show or any show that I do. All you have to do is head over to the website. It's behindtheshot.tv. Find the episode you're looking for, read the blog post. I always write a little bit about my guest, no exception today. I did the same thing. There's always a little gallery of their shots there as well. And of course, if you want anything as far as links or anything like that, those that we talk about during the show, those are also in the blog post. They're also in the description down below the like and subscribe button on YouTube. So, feel free to click any of the links there. One last thing is if you're looking for a specific section that we're going to talk about, especially today with the R5 Mark II and the R1, if you're watching on YouTube, I always include chapter markers. So head on down there, timestamps down there that are clickable. If you head down, click the timestamp, jump to any section that you want, and that's absolutely fine with me. So full disclosure, I am a Canon shooter. I shoot an R6, usually on my left hip. I have a dual rapid strap, camera strap. I shoot an R6 on my left hip. I shoot an R5, the original version. We'll call it, Mark I on my right hip. And I have been curious about what was going to happen with both the R5 Mark II and the R1 for a long time. Mostly the R1. I'm not going to spend that kind of money probably, but I was more interested in the R1 originally than the R5 Mark II. And I had actually written off even watching the announcements of these cameras because it was at 3 o'clock in the morning my time. Strangely enough, I actually ended up being awake at that point and went, oh, you know what? They're doing the Canon announcement. And I went and watched it, and watching it gave me all kinds of opinions. First of all, I had strong opinions on the presentation itself for the announcements of these cameras. I don't think it was a great presentation. It was not Canon at their best, the way that they did the announcement of these cameras. But I also came away with some serious opinions on the gear that itself. There's no question these cameras are going to be in demand. The R5 Mark II at the time of recording this was just put out into the wild, but it's already back ordered. Like B&H, I think, said when I went and looked yesterday, it's back ordered to September 6th. The R1 is not going to be released until late fall, and according again to B&H, the expected release date for a Canon R1 is November 26th. So nobody's got that camera at all yet. But again, we got a great guest today that has used both of them. Today, we're going to talk about real world use. And in my guest's case, we're going to focus on the sports side of things. Hopefully there is some helpful information here. Whether you are a Canon shooter, maybe you're a first-time camera buyer, maybe you're considering switching from another brand, upgrading from a previous body, whatever it is, I'm hoping we give you some information that helps you. But I will warn you ahead of time, this is mainly going to be a photography discussion. If you're interested in the video side of things, I'd suggest going and watching the stuff from Chris and Jordan over at Petapixel. I'm hoping at some point I can get them on the show to talk about their thoughts on these bodies. But I'm not going to cover a lot of the video stuff today, so I apologize in advance. But again, hopefully we'll do that down the road. So with all that kind of out of the way, please welcome to the show my friend, sports and event photographer, Mr. Jeff Cable. Jeff, how are you, buddy?
Doing good. Doing good.
It's so good to see you again. Last time I saw you was WPPI.
That's right. We ran into each other briefly there. That was fun to see you. It was fun to actually be back at a trade show and be able to interact with people post-COVID and all that. Yeah, it was nice.
Yeah, but you've had a much more interesting year since then than I have, because you've been to, what is it now, your 8th Olympics?
Yeah, I just did my 8th Olympics. And prior to the Olympics, it was literally like I did a photo tour to Costa Rica, came back for a week, did a photo tour to Peru, came back for a week, and then went to Paris for the month. So it's been a whirlwind summer. I've literally been home for 2 weeks the entire summer.
You were in Paris for a full month?
Just about, like 3.5 weeks. Yeah.
Wow, wow. So you've been on the show a bunch of times. You're a friend of the show, a friend of mine. I'm not going to go deep into your resume, folks. If you want to know more about Jeff Cable, go obviously to his website, jeffcable.com. But I do want to mention, along with the 8 Olympics, when you shoot the Olympics, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you're shooting for Team USA, but is it both the men's and women's water polo?
Yeah, so I shoot as many sports as I can, but contractually, it's Summer Olympics. I shoot for USA Water Polo men and women, and then winter, which will be coming up in Milan, and that credentialing process starts already in like 5 weeks from now. And I shoot for USA Hockey men's and women's also. And so, but again, when I'm not shooting those sports, I'm shooting as much other stuff as I can for Team USA.
So I've got questions because obviously you posted, and we're going to show some images later. You posted at all kinds of different sports. So once you've got the credentials at the Olympics, even though you're, contractually there for water polo, are you allowed to go into any venue and shoot any sport you want as long as you've got a photo credential?
Yeah, there's different
how
levels
does
of
that
credentials. Work? Yeah, there's different levels of credentials. So there's what's called an EPS, which means you're sports specific. And so you're limited to only that venue. If you have an EP full access pass, which I do, then I can go anywhere I want. So water polo is about an hour and 20-minute game. I get to the venue usually about an hour early. And then by the time I get done submitting, going through all the images I shot, we can talk about that in a little bit, how much I overshot with the R1, the first water polo game. But so
hold on. You can't introduce that and not do it. Let's do that now. You overshot for the first water polo game. Why?
So I accidentally had the camera in its full speed of 40 frames per second and pre-capture turned on, which means every time you hit the button, it's going to go back half a second and shoot. And so normally I get back. So with an prior to the R3, when I was shooting with the 1DX, I think I was doing about 1,500 shots per game. With the R3, I was up to like 2,500 shots per game. And I accidentally had the R1 on the first game at 40 frames a second pre-capture. And I think I got back to the press center and had 5,700 shots. And I was not happy with myself because
holy crap,
my deadline's 15 minutes. So I had 15 minutes to try to go through all 5,000 and find the best ones. It was not pretty.
Hold on. So you had over 5,000 shots. And you've only got 15 minutes to choose the shots, do a little bit of processing on the shots, get them uploaded to whoever you need to get them to.
Yeah.
All in 15 minutes?
So, yes. So I go through the images, find the best ones. Like you said, the retouching at the Olympics, we can't clone things out and do all that, but it's
right.
Adjustments to exposure, shadows, highlights, and cropping pretty much. Maybe white balance, although typically not. The auto white balance on these new cameras is dead on. So it's retouching, resizing back to the size that the team wants, which I believe I think it was 1,800 pixels for the team, and then get those offloaded and up to their content management system, all within 15 minutes for the key 10 or so images, and then I deliver another 30 or 40 within the next half hour. So one per minute, just crank them out, the best ones, and then that takes another hour, give or take half an hour. By the time I'm done, and then I'm off to the next venue going to shoot whatever else it is. So,
okay, so many questions. So I have to go on this sidetrack because you opened I feel like a lawyer in court, like on Law and Order, where the other attorney opens the door to something and now you got to go down it. Yeah. I know you're a photo mechanic user, as am I.
Yeah.
But still, even with photo mechanic, which is, by the way, folks, if you're not using photo mechanic, what are you doing? But even with photo mechanic, to go through over 5,000 shots and pick the shots is not an easy process. And I think that in and of itself will help some people. So give me a quick helicopter view of how you pick 10 or 30 out of 5,000 quickly.
Well, a couple things. One is as I'm shooting, a couple things. One is what's the story? So let's say I'm shooting for water polo and the goaltender has had an amazing game and stopped most of the shots. I better have a good shot of the goaltender stopping that ball coming in. If one athlete scored 4 goals, I better have a good shot of that athlete scoring a goal. So I'm thinking about that story that needs to be told. But also as I'm shooting, I'm like, oh my gosh, I got that killer shot. I know I got that shot. So I know to go and look for that. It's kind of in my brain, like what to look for. But as I'm jamming through images with the arrow key and I'm just going really fast, and I'm looking for the peak of action, where I'm tack sharp on the focus, something that tells a story, and then I color code it. Like I like that one, and I'm jamming through. No, 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 no. Yes. No, 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 no. Yes. And then I jam through as fast as I can. Then I turn off anything that I haven't color coded. So I might have 80 or I might have 40 images. Then I'll go through those and I'll say, oh, I know what I just went through. So I might have 8 shots of the goalie stopping the ball, but I know that the best shot was that one back there. So I'm gonna skip this one, and edit that one. So it's kind of a mental process. You have to be on. And the hard part about the Olympics is I'm working like 7:30 in the morning till 1:30 in the morning every day for 3 weeks. And so you're exhausted too. And you've got to stay sharp mentally, physically all the time, just like the athletes do, to be able to perform like this. And so it's just trying to remember what the key shots were and retouch the right ones and get them back to the team. And it's not always action. Like there's times when the team would tell me, hey, the first lady, Jill Biden, was in the audience, was in the stands watching one of the games. They definitely want a shot of that. Or, Guy Fieri, or Flavor Flav, or whoever's there.
Or you had a shot of both of those guys together.
Yeah, that was fun to hang with those guys. It was really cool. And but sometimes it's not just the action, right? It might be that. It might be the reaction on the bench. Clearly, if like a medal game, it's more of the reaction than it is the action sometimes. So it's trying to find those things that tell that story. And just, again, I'm trying to process that in my mind. Like, I know the team wants this. There'll be a great shot of the goaltender stopping the ball, but it didn't stop the ball. Like it hit their hand, but then it went in. I don't want to submit that one because they're going to know that that was actually a shot that went in. Even though photographically it looks amazing, I don't want to send that one to them. So it's kind of that thought process. Yeah.
And that's kind of how I cull, is multiple passes. I whittle it down, hide everything else. I use stars because I'm colorblind. So for me, using color tags is harder, but I'll use, 1 star. Anything that stays 0 stars is not going to make it through. So I go through first, I 1 star everything I'm keeping, delete the 0 stars. Then I go through the 1 stars and go 2 star, 3 star until I whittle it down to the number that I want. You mentioned your photo tours earlier, Costa Rica and stuff like that. You have obviously at all times, you've got some photo tours in the works. If people do want to know about those, where can they go?
Yeah, just go to my website. Just go to jeffcable.com, CABLE.com. And on there, you'll see photo tours on there. And I'll list out everything I've got. Like the photo tours to Costa Rica sell out faster than most of my other ones. I've already sold out for this year. I'm already sold out for May of next year. And I just did a back-to-back one scheduled for late next year. And so I have openings then. I'm going to just stay down there for a whole month and do 2 back-to-back. So, and
then also, folks, if you haven't read Jeff's blog, as he's at the Olympics, he's doing blog posts. So when you go to jeffcable.com, check out the blog as well. So here's what I want to do. I want to start with the R5 Mark II. Then we'll go into the R1. Obviously, folks, there's going to be some overlap. Some of the features are the same. So, if we cover something on the R5 that is the exact same feature on the R1, we're not going to cover it specifically in the R1 section. We've kind of covered it unless something different happened or in some way it's a little better on that particular body. At the end, time provided, I know you use some new lenses too, right?
Good.
Okay, so time provided, we'll go through some lenses, but I also want to go through some shots. He's given me a ton of shots from both the R1 and the R5 Mark II, and I want to go through those. It's not going to be, for those of you that watch the show or listen to the show regularly, it's not going to be the normal thing where we're going to dissect, 9 shots or whatever it is in detail. I want to specifically talk about the challenges that these specific shots had and how the R5 Mark II or the R1, kind of coped with that situation. So let's start it with the R5 Mark II, which, by the way, has a retail price of $4,300. And I actually want to focus on that because somebody made a comment online that I can't believe this camera is $4,300. And somebody else posted something interesting. And that was comparing the original R5 when it came out and sold for whatever it was, $3,900, something like that. And that based on inflation, it's actually about the same price. Yeah. So while it sounds a lot higher, buying power wise, it's about the same price, but I still think it's really high. So without getting into details, we'll do that in a second. Knowing it's $4,300 and you shot with it for 3 weeks at the Olympics, four weeks at the Olympics, just in summary, is it a fair value for that body?
Yeah, I mean, it's expensive. I've already ordered mine.
Okay.
And so, I mean, that tells you something. I'm selling my R5. I'll sell my R3 as soon as the R1 comes out. Yes, there are certain key things on that camera that, put it this way, when I was at Olympics, as you mentioned, I was living on the R1 and the R5 too.
Right.
I had to give those back. The R1 was a pre-production. The R5 Mark II was probably production, but it was a loan. So I had to give them back. And I came home and I had to shoot. I shot an event 3 days later when I got home, and I had to go back to my R3 and my R6 too. That was hard. There were definitely some features of those cameras that I got very used to over that month. And as I explained in my blog, and I did a review of the R1 and the R5 II on my blog, and I said, look, if you're just shooting your kids' sports, or you're doing family pictures around the backyard or whatever, do you need to upgrade to these cameras? Probably not. I mean, the R6 II is a damn good camera for the money and would be fine. If you're a serious photographer, depending on what you're shooting, not just sports, but I know, like, for when I do go to Costa Rica and we have a bird that's ready to take off, the pre-capture of the R5 II and the R1 is going to be a game changer, because you can literally wait for the bird to fly and then press the button the rest of the way down. It'll go back half a second. Like, typically when we're down there, we're waiting for the bird to fly and you're getting tired holding that lens. And by the time the bird flies, you hit the button, you got an empty branch, right? And so depending on what you're shooting, this thing's going to be unbelievably amazing. But again, not everybody is shooting wildlife or needs to do pre-capture. Maybe it's, maybe that's money not well spent. So it's not for everybody. But for me and for what I do, it was unbelievable, especially at the Olympics when you have fast action.
Right, exactly. And for me, that pre-capture, I was talking to another music photographer about this, and they're like, look, if you couldn't shoot with the R5 original version, then the problem isn't the camera, which I agree.
Right.
But in my case, I'm not touring with a musician. I'm shooting for media. I get 3 songs. I research the bands, but I don't know when that bass player or guitarist or singer is going to jump in the air. And a lot of times I'm following them and I've got focus and they jump and I hit the button. And by that point I've missed the one moment or the one frame. So I'm fast, half a second doesn't sound like a lot, and we'll get into it when we get into features, but the number of shots I could pre-capture in that half a second at whatever frames a second is actually that could be a game changer. Of the features that are new on the R5 Mark II, were there any specific ones other than the pre-capture that you were super happy to see?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, the eye control, which on the R3 I turned off. I tried it on the R3. I found it very distracting with a cursor moving around my eye, in the LCD or my eyepiece, and because it's tracking my pupil. I don't want to see this cursor moving all over the place.
Right.
And I also didn't find it very accurate. With the R1 and the R5 II, the eye control is so good that whatever athlete I would look at, it was locking in on. So that, which is something that I didn't use in the past, I loved. I found it incredibly helpful. The pre-capture, which I didn't think I would use and didn't use for probably the first half of the Olympics. For shooting sports that I knew and could predict the play, I didn't need it. For sports that I didn't know well, like when I was shooting volleyball,
right,
stuff was happening. I go, God, I missed that shot. And I turned on pre-capture and I started getting shots that I was missing. That was amazing. So there's certain things that, the focus, and we'll talk about the stickiness of the focus,
right,
on both cameras, was, of all things, was the biggest game changer. Like, staggeringly amazing.
So, it's funny, the R5 for me, like I say, with music is going to be a big deal for me, pre-capturing certain things. But there's a couple of things in these cameras that I'm personally really looking forward to utilizing. And the eye focus is one for those of you that are listening, I don't want to be confusing here. I don't mean eye focus as in it captures the subject's eye. It's focusing with your own eye based on where you look. Eye control focus. And for me, I actually think it would be a problem, and I'm curious what you say about this. So let's say that I've got multiple band members on stage and I'm zoomed in and I'm focusing on the lead singer, and maybe the guitarist is out in the periphery, right? And I'm looking at it out of the side of my eye, and maybe because you always want to keep both eyes open and you want to look around, and the singer's doing something and you're focused on him waiting, and suddenly you realize the guitarist is walking up to you to get in your face. If my eye looks over, the focus point's going to move, and I may not want it to move. I may want it to be on the singer, and I just want to look over there and go, is anything happening? Yeah, so to me, I think it would be a bad thing. Am I wrong?
No, because what you'll do is if you keep holding the shutter halfway down, it stays to where you looked last. The minute you let go of the shutter button, or in my case, I back button focus. The minute I hit the back button again, it'll go to where my eye is looking now. So if I'm looking at the lead singer and I want to keep it there, I just keep my thumb on that AF on button and shoot. And then this is the case. This is the case of the Olympics. If I'm on this athlete and I want to stay on that athlete, I can just keep my button back down and shoot. And then I could let go of that button, move my eye to somebody else and hit it again. So and it's weird that motor skill becomes something very second nature. I had to someone asked me about that, and I thought, how did I do that? It just happened naturally for me.
I'm anxious to. Really well. I'm really anxious to try. Was there anything that was missing that you had hoped for, like any glaring disappointments in the R5 Mark II specifically?
No, in both cameras, the one thing that I wanted is a way to turn on and off the pre-capture mode with a single press, and that doesn't exist today. So I have to go into so I had to create in the green menu at the very end of the Canon, you can customize your menu settings. And I had to put it there. So I have to hit menu, go in there, turn on, off, and menu back. And I talked to Canon about this. So I got a chance to use both cameras about a month before the Olympics. They flew us out for a special meeting for those of us going to Paris.
The one in Arizona?
Training. Yeah. And so they had two meetings. They had one for us and one for the press. And so one of the feedback I gave was, I want this ability. And they said, yeah, it doesn't exist right now. I think this will happen in firmware. Maybe by the time it ships for the R1, possibly, and probably in an incremental firmware update for the R5 II, hopefully. But it'd be nice to be able to turn it on with just a single press and not have to go through menus. So like when I was shooting for USA Water Polo, and there was a penalty shot, and those are always great to photograph because you get all the action, water splash, and everything else. And I don't want to miss any of that. Sometimes it happens so fast that you miss the beginning of it. So what I would do is penalty shot, I'd immediately go into menu setting, change it to pre-capture, turn on the camera to 40 frames or 30 frames a second instead of 15, and then boom, then it'd be the penalty shot. Then I'd have to go back and change all that because the game would resume. And it'd be nice if I could have had that all pre-done with one button. And at least I didn't find that to be the case. I don't think Canon had a workaround for that yet. I think that'll happen. And that's pretty minor, but that was the only thing. I mean, honestly, like I said before, the game changer for me wasn't pre-capture, wasn't the eye control. It was just how good the focus is. Like, my take rate on the images was crazy good.
More than you would have normally had? I mean, noticeably more?
Noticeably. Here's the crazy thing. Let's go back to shooting, not even Tokyo Olympics. Let me go back to Rio. I'm using a 1DX Mark III, I think it was at the time. Now, you have, let's take women's gymnastics, and you have Simone Biles on the uneven bars. So she's going from here to here, kind of like I'm out of focus right now. And that's a whole other story. But she's going from here to here, up, down, and I'm trying to keep a focal point on her. And so 15% of the time, I have a good sharp focus on her, and the rest of the time, I'm just all over the place. With the Canon R1, it was so good. Even when Simone was twirling, flipping in the air, her face would only be in the sequence for a quarter of a second, then back out again, then back in again, then back out again. And it locked in. And it was like literally my take rate, which went from 15% in Rio to 90% or 95% in Paris. That is crazy. Like, I showed a video recently, I just put on my YouTube channel because it was part of my blog post, where I showed the sequence of her doing the dismount from the beam. And at 40 frames a second, you could just animate the whole thing.
Right.
Every one of them is tack sharp. It's at 2.8. I'm not at f8 or f11, at f2.8, and it was tack sharp almost every time on her face. Crazy.
So when I bring up action priority mode, I want to talk about what you just said with the Simone Biles sequence. But I do have to ask, did you, how do I want to word this? What was it, stock settings, or did you go in and customize the, react to something coming in front of you or any of those type of autofocus settings? Did you customize anything, or was it pretty much what the camera was set up for?
It was where the camera was set up. I tweaked a bunch of settings to what I want. Most of those were not focus related. Most of those were like buttons and dials, and I'm trying to remember what else I changed. But no, as far as focus is concerned, the one thing I do is I do double back button focus. So AF on button is for eye and subject detection, and then the asterisk key to the right, normally for metering, I turn that to be a single point servo follow focus, so that there were times like for water polo, and I wrote this in the blog, the autofocus on this camera is staggeringly amazing, except did not work as well in water. So for water polo and swimming, when you have very little of the body in the frame, and it's mostly either face and they're wearing caps or goggles, and it did not do as well. So incredibly well for anything where you have the body. So athletics, whether it's running or pole vault or long jump or gymnastics, volleyball, whatever. If you have the full body, it's one thing. In the water, I had to a lot of times stop doing eye detection and jump back to a single point focus. A lot of back and forth in the water.
Okay, and that makes. And by the way, I do the same thing. I my normal back button AF button is continuous with a point that I've chosen, and when I hit the asterisk button, it switches over to eye detection. But
so we have ours reversed.
Yeah,
I do it the other way around. Yeah.
So I want to talk about some of the specs and some of the features. If you tried them, what you thought of them. I understand you may not have tried, absolutely everything, but I want to start with what you just talked about, which is the autofocus system, specifically the dual pixel intelligent autofocus, which is now sensitive both horizontally and vertical as far as the lines of precision are concerned, and greater precision. It was interesting because David Bergman posted something on Instagram, and I reached out to him and said, do you mind if I quote you on here? He said that he thinks the autofocus on the 5D Mark II, R5 Mark II,
yep,
is as good or better than the R3. Agreed?
Better than the R3. So what's weird is when I went down and met with Canon and tried both cameras for the first time, and they said, gee, the focus of the R5 Mark II is about 95% of the focus of the R1. And I thought, it can't be that good. Just, it doesn't have the raw power. It doesn't have the, and it does. Like it is like I said, that I use this thing. I lived with these cameras. I mean, I abused them. I shot 85,000 images with both of these cameras over the 3.5 weeks. And
wait, how many images? Rate,
85,000. That's typical for Olympics. It's a lot. But I mean,
man.
I put these things through their paces. I mean, literally, when you say, did you use every feature? I used just about every feature. And I tried some of the different things, but I use a lot of it. I don't shoot a video. We're not allowed to shoot video at the Olympics. If you're a still photographer, you're not. We're not even supposed to use our iPhone. We're not supposed to even FaceTime like back home because that's a live broadcast from the Olympics. And it's
copyright issue. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So, but I used a lot of the features. But the thing that just kept coming back to me was, again, the take rate, like that almost everything was sharp and where I wanted it to be sharp. And, part of me thinks, God, it's getting almost too easy. Like, I mean, because there's certain, I remember in past Olympics, both London and Rio, when shooting things like the vault for women's gymnastics, where they're coming high speed running, and then it's like, right? It's so fast. And I just remember thinking, God, I just can't shoot this. It's too hard. Like I can't get my focus point on them. And now, if you have a 95% take rate by just having the camera do the work for you, I mean, that says a lot about the camera. And of course, everybody's like telling me, oh, your images are amazing. And this one image that I think I gave it to you of Simone Biles on the uneven bars, and it's like perfectly focused on her eyes. Like, I wish I could take full credit for that, but I mean, that was the camera.
Wow. Okay. So I want to touch on the eye control autofocus now, which we've kind of already discussed. Probably won't go deep, but that's okay. I did not think, with this being on the R3, and I knew it would come to the R1, obviously a higher up body than the R3. I didn't think that this feature would make it into the R5 Mark II. I would have bet money. No. They're going to differ. They would not even give the 5 series the ability to have metering follow your focus point. Metering was always center metered when you moved your focus point in spot metering on a 5 series. So I'm like, there's no way. Like, this is going to be the R series version of spot metering following your focus point. They're going to go, that's a differentiation in the product line. We're not going to do it, but they did it. And what was interesting, again, going back to David Bergman, he said that the eye control autofocus is insanely good. And here's what he does. He uses it with back button focus for the initial acquisition of the AF point, so that he can kind of choose, what he wants to focus on. And he says that it even worked with his progressive glasses. Now, contrast that to the fact that in Arizona at that press meeting, after the announcement, Jordan Drake of Petapixel has said he could not get it to work with his eye. And then when Petapixel actually got the release version of the R5 Mark II, the two of them went out with a friend of theirs up in Canada, out into the woods, and the guy that they had with them, who's a photojournalist, couldn't get the eye focus to recognize and register with his eye. So there's clearly some still hit and miss based on the person's eye. But in your experience, it registered for you and it worked well enough that will you use it?
Yeah, I mean, I did, and I used it so much at the Olympics that when I came back to my other cameras here, which I don't use it, well, I can't use it on the R6 II, doesn't have it, and the R3 has it, and I don't like it, and I turned it off. So it was weird when I came here and I shot an event on Saturday, and I'm looking at the subject, and the thing isn't going to who I'm looking at. I'm like, oh, that's right. And so I had to either use the joystick or just kind of move the lens around to try to reacquire who I wanted. I became dependent on it. That's weird. I mean, that says a lot.
Interesting.
So the one thing I really didn't compare is the eye control of the R5 II and the eye control of the R1. I used them both. I used it more on the R1 than the R5 II. So it'd be interesting to try it again on the R5 II in a real world case here. But they both appeared to be really good. And I, like you, was very surprised that they had eye control, that they had pre-capture on the R5 II, that they had the focus system is 95% of the R1.
Yeah.
And it's 40 megapixels. So in many respects, when some people say the R5 II is the more exciting camera, they're not. I don't know that they're that wrong about that. I think the R5 II is going to be amazing. And for me, when I shoot events, I don't want to shoot 40 megapixels. I don't need that many pixels. So
yeah, 45
one of the reasons I like the R3 and the R6 II for events is it's the right pixel count for me. But when I go to Costa Rica or Africa, and I know I'm going to be cropping in on some of those images, love shooting with the R5. So like I said, I ordered the R5 II immediately because when I go back down to Costa Rica, I want the R5 II for sure, for that focusability, the pre-capture and all that.
It's like I said, I was really excited to see what was going to be announced in the R1. And I was much less so for the R5 Mark II. I'm like, it's a Mark II body and the R5 is a damn good body. And then they came out. And I'm actually kind of super excited about the R5 Mark II, and it kind of surprises me. What's interesting is there is a difference between the pre-burst. The pre-burst on the they're both a half a second, but because they have a different frame rate, the R5 II is 15 shots on the pre-burst. Now, does it only work with electronic shutter, or is it a pre-burst if you're doing mechanical shutter?
No, I believe it's both. Although I shot electronic shutter for the first time, I usually don't. And because there's almost no rolling shutter, I mean, I saw no distortion. So I went.
So that was going to be one of my questions is, did you get any rolling shutter? Time. Because Petapixel had estimated, I'm trying to think, and after the Arizona thing, they guessed, they were very clear. These are rough numbers. We're not going to stick by these, but we think I think they said about a 30th of a second read time. And they tested it once they got the release body of the R5 Mark II. And I think I should have written it down, but I'm pretty sure they said it reads at a 60th of a second, which is super fast. So you're
Yeah,
not
I
getting
found
any distortion in a ball or anything like that?
no. I shot Coco Gauff at tennis. I shot the badminton. I'd never photographed badminton before. Man, that's a fast sport.
Oh yeah.
So there was some blur, but that's motion blur because they're so fast, even a thousandth of a second. But no, I mean, I didn't see any distortion. And so,
Wow.
and previously, I usually don't shoot full electronic. I usually use electronic first curtain. And so that was different as well. The other thing that was interesting at this Olympics, I think this is probably the first Olympics where you heard almost no shutters. There was one guy shooting next to me. I think it was when Simone Biles was out doing individual competition, and he had an old Nikon, and it was like clack 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 clack. And I was like, I looked at him like shut up! Like it was so loud. Everybody else was just silent mode, right? Just shooting. And I remember in one of the photographer meetings, the main photographer meeting prior to the Olympics starting, they went through and they said, if these sports, you have to shoot silent mode, golf being one of them.
Right.
But man, it was weird because it passed Olympics from London and way back. I mean, you expected that. I remember shooting diving, and you have the diver come out to the diving board, really quiet, and then they jump off the diving board, and you hear 50 of us, and then we'd all look and see what we got. Next diver come up, right? Like it was this cadence of the sound.
Right.
And now you just don't have it. And the one guy that had it was like, what, you're using some old stuff there, man. Like it was pretty funny.
So action priority mode. When you were talking about the Simone Biles thing, I thought about the action priority mode, which is a new feature. It's on the R5 Mark II and it's on the R1, where it prioritizes certain sports related actions. So understanding if there's a basketball player that's going to take a shot or make a pass, and the camera will actually think to itself, I'm making words up here, but
Yep.
in effect, the machine learning will say, oh, they're about to do X. You want to focus on them. Did you try action priority mode at all?
No, I'll tell you why I didn't. It's only certain sports. I think it's like only 3 sports right now or something. And I didn't
It's
shoot
like
any
basketball,
of those sports.
baseball, something like that.
And soccer, I think, is the other one.
Yeah, I think soccer's one of
Or
them.
for those overseas, football. So no, I didn't try it because almost everything I was shooting was not those sports, and I didn't even try it. And the funny thing is, it also has the ability now to train the camera for someone's face,
Right.
Which I also didn't use until I had to shoot one of the runners and one athlete specifically for a client of mine. And so I thought, well, let me pre-register their face on this. And I tried it. And it's pretty cool because basically what it tells the camera is lock in on this person. If they're in the frame, find them and stay on them. And I found that, I mean, the focus, I was using my eye detection, my eye control. So I was already on the athlete. So I don't know if it really helped or not. So I would say in 100% honesty, like if someone said to me, how good is it? I don't know, because I didn't use it enough. Because here's the thing, if I'm shooting water polo, that you've got 15 different athletes coming in and out, I don't want to prioritize one, right? I just want to get whoever I'm looking at, whoever has the ball, or maybe I want to not focus on who has the ball, but maybe the 2-meter position where they're fighting, and scrumming and trying to get position in the water. So I didn't want to prioritize any one person. So there's rare cases where I had the chance to try it and didn't use it enough in that respect.
It's funny because that's another one that Bergman mentioned. And for those of you that aren't aware, the camera has the ability for you to prioritize up to 10 subjects. So you register different faces and different subjects, and it will track them. One thing I'm not clear on before I say what Bergman said about this, so if you're in that mode and you've registered one of these people, let's say you've only registered one like you did instead of 10. And let's say I registered person B, but I'm currently focused on person A as they're coming around the corner on a track. And then suddenly person B comes into the frame, but I've got my focus point. Will it switch, or do I have to let the autofocus button on and then it will find them? Like it's not going to override me, is it?
Yeah, I think if you're holding that button down, it'll stay. But the minute you let go and hit it again, I think it'll jump over the other person. And I don't remember. It's so funny because I don't know if you have this, but like sometimes people ask me, like, what did you do? And I don't even know. My thumbs and hand and
Right.
my
Yeah.
brain are all working in concert. Actually, the hardest part of the Olympics was they gave us 1 day of training on both cameras. And then I flew home, and then I landed in Paris, and they handed me 2 R1s and an R5 for the entire games. But essentially, I was using a camera that I'd never used before, other than 6 hours of playing with it. That was not easy. I mean,
Right.
the thought of going, and I told this to Canon, like, you want us to go to something as big as the Olympics, you can't get much bigger, with a prototype and try to figure it out there. Yeah, that was not ideal. And they knew that. I mean, it was really a tough situation. Because I remember before it was London or Rio, I don't remember, when they had like the 1DX and and, they got me one like 3 weeks before the Olympics to start playing with it. I'm like, this is not enough time. And here I am showing up in Paris with half a day to get going. And I will say that the first shoot I did, which is just a press interview, right? Because they're doing all the lead up to the games before the Olympics start. It took me a couple minutes to try to figure things out. Luckily, it was a press interview. I had 45 minutes with them up in perfect light to shoot, but that took some doing to get used to it and to trust it, which is important. I know you probably have this too. When you get a brand new camera, you're hesitant to use it on a real job.
Yep.
Until you feel like, okay, this is the tool. It's working with me. We're in concert. Okay. And this is what happened at the Olympics. By the end of the Olympics, that R1 was like part of my arm. But for the first couple of days, it was like, okay, am I doing this right? Or like I told you, I shot in the wrong mode for that first water polo game. And I was like, oh, hell no, I'm not doing that again. So it was like, okay, I don't need to be at 40 frames a second. I'm going to set the speed at 30 and 15. And I'll shoot at 15 frames a second until there's a shootout or something else. I'll jump to 30. I'm going to turn pre-capture off unless I want to turn it on. And there are times where I'd turn on everything to full speed and pre-capture for a penalty shot, and I'd forget to turn it off, and I'd be shooting. I'm like, oh, shoot. And I go back and turn it off, and I'd have an extra 500 shots. So there's a learning curve to it, and it was not ideal starting with that kind of situation.
And that's one of the cool things about the Olympics is camera companies for years have given pre-release models to Olympic shooters. I mean, the number of times that people scan photos of Olympic photographers looking for black tape over a name or over a model number on the prioritizing of subject matter. Here's what Bergman said. He thought it was pretty cool. He's, by the way, for those of you that don't know David, he's the tour photographer for Luke Combs. He registered Luke Combs. And so whenever Luke is in the scene, it will prioritize him. And what he did was he set the AF point selection button on the back to toggle that function on and off quickly, right, so that he could get to it. That's something, I think it could be neat if I'm going to shoot a concert and I register, each band member or maybe the lead singer to prioritize the lead singer. The other two things I thought were interesting about the R5 Mark II is they finally introduced blackout free viewfinder, electronic viewfinder. That's a big deal to me whenever I hit the shutter and it goes black. That could be cool. And this thing now combined with the right lens will give you 8.5 stops of image stabilization. So, for handhold stuff, that's pretty cool. 45 megapixel, I don't even know where that came from. 45 megapixel stacked sensor. And here's something I thought was interesting. I'm curious if you saw or not. I doubt it. But there are reports, specifically, it's been confirmed now. Petapixel had an article on it, in fact, and Chris and Jordan from Petapixel confirmed it in their latest video. The stacked sensor does cause, compared to the original R5, a dynamic range loss. So the R5 on mechanical shutter has greater dynamic range than the R5 Mark II on mechanical shutter. But on electronic shutter, it's about the same. And actually, that's only for the first two native ISOs. As you get higher in ISO, they line up about exact. I'm guessing for you shooting almost entirely electronic shutter, which by the way, folks, 30 frames a second electronic, 12 frames a second mechanical. I'm guessing you probably didn't notice a dynamic range difference?
I didn't. And, but to be fair, at the Olympics, it's cheating. We have great lighting. It's lit for television.
Right.
So, we've got great lighting, great backgrounds, and the best athletes in the world. It's kind of cheating. I tell people sometimes, like, shooting a high school game is harder. You have crappy light, terrible white balance, no one in the stands, or if they are, they're not paying attention. You don't have the best athletes in the world, right? Like, so shooting
Right.
the Olympics is some respects easier. It's just that you have to survive it.
As a working pro top level sports photographer, will you ever use the in-camera upscaling so you can take a 45 megapixel shot and in-camera upscale it to 179 megapixels, but it converts it to JPEG when it's doing it? Or the neural network noise reduction? See, to me, for the neural network noise reduction, that's a hard no for me, because I don't want it using its own neural network to decide where, how much. I'd rather take a noisy shot myself and selectively process it. Would you use either of those?
So I use Topaz because I think it's so good. Like,
Yep.
I forget who turned me on to it, Scott Kilby or someone told me about it. Or actually, it might have been my son. And I'm like, holy cow, this is so good. And so, I can upscale in Topaz. I can do the denoise in Topaz. And so I've done it in the camera just to play with it. Like when I was in Phoenix, I tried it. But honestly, I could do it in post. And of course, I prefer to shoot RAW. I couldn't shoot RAW
Right.
at the Olympics because nothing would open a RAW file at the time. Now both the R5 II and the R1 can be opened up inside Adobe Camera Raw. At the time they couldn't. But sure, I like to shoot RAW. And it's funny, I know we're going to talk about some of the images here in a minute, but like when I shot the image at the beach volleyball venue at sunset, I knew that that wasn't an action shot. It was going to be more of a scenic shot. I wanted all the resolution I could get, so I chose the R5 II over the R1 because I knew that I'd enlarge it, which is enlarged behind me, poster size. I showed it to you
Right.
earlier. I wanted all the pixels I get. And actually, I've run that through Topaz and I made it even bigger just so I could print it even larger if I want.
And that's the thing to me is both of those convert to a JPEG. So if you're shooting RAW, I would rather take the RAW and be able to see the image first. Like I just really want to see it first. This camera still has a CF Express and an SD slot.
Yeah.
Did you hit buffer issues at all?
Yeah.
From the SD slot?
So yeah, honestly, with the R5 II, especially if you're shooting RAW plus JPEG, which I never recommend, unless in the case of a prototype, you couldn't open the RAW. Generally, I tell people don't shoot RAW plus JPEG. Just shoot RAW. If you want a JPEG, it's easy to go into your software and convert it in a couple seconds.
Yep.
But so if I was shooting RAW plus JPEG sometimes at the Olympics with the R5 II, assuming that eventually I'd be able to open the RAW, which halfway through the Olympic Games we could. I hit buffer numerous times where I just watched the red light and couldn't use the camera. So I'm not a big fan of SD cards. I've said this with the R3. One of the things I hated about the R3 is that they had CF Express and SD. So you got one slot really fast and one that just cripples you. And so one of the things I love about the R1 is I could fire off JPEGs at 40 frames a second and probably never let go. I mean, it's so fast. And I'm using the ProGrade digital super fast CF Express cards. And man, I mean, I could shoot till I'm dead,
Okay.
So yeah, that the one differentiation and one, thing that I don't like about the R5 II is if you are shooting out a lot of images, you can hit buffer issues
Now,
there.
Getting the images off the camera, this camera has Wi-Fi 6E and 6 support, which is great. Focusing down to minus 7.5 EV for photos, minus 5.5 EV for video. And so kind of wrapping up before we get into the R1, overall impressions after using it. You bought one, so I'm guessing it's a hard yes for you.
Yeah, I mean, I like to have the latest gear. So, I'll flip stuff. My lenses, I can shoot the same lens for 20 years, but the camera bodies with the changes they came out with, and that's not true of everything. Like I've told people, like with this lens, when they went from version 1 to version 2, it's not that much of a difference. I mean, certain lenses, they go from version 1 to version 2. It's a huge difference.
Right.
So I'm very realistic, and I tell people on the blog, I don't, even though Canon sponsors me, they're okay with me given the realistic, and I did on my blog, I said, this stuff's great, and it didn't work as great in this mode, like water polo or whatever. But the camera itself and the features that the R5 II has, both in pre-capture, most importantly, the focusability, Um, and just the overall improvements they've made to the camera, to me, warrants me the difference between selling the old one, buying the new one, maybe a couple $1,000s. It's a tool, right? We're professionals. We use them all the time. Like I said, if you're just someone who shoots once a month, picture of your granddaughter in the backyard, maybe it doesn't cost justified. But for those of us who are using them a lot, definitely worth it.
Okay. So R1, here's the big one. $6,300 for the R1. So I guess the first question on the R1 is it the flagship camera that people really expected and wanted, or as many people claimed, and you own the R3, is it just an R3 Mark II?
Well, see, here's the problem. Like when you say that, an improvement, I mean, the R3 is already a good camera. So if you take the R3 and make it that much better, I don't really understand the difference in what is the difference in a flagship and an R3, a better R3, because the R3 was the flagship. So to me, that's more of a nomenclature, right? It's just psychobabble. I mean, to me, it's like, does it do a better job? And if it does a better job, is it worth the incremental difference in cost? And again, if you look at the physical body, it's not much different, right? But what it does behind the scenes, number one, the focusing is much better than the R3. And the R3 was good. The R3 was good, but it's this much better. Like I said, the pre-capture, which I probably would not use when I'm shooting a wedding or a bar mitzvah, but for shooting sports or wildlife or whatever, pre-capture I think would be great. The eye control on the R1 is spectacular. Much, much better than the R3. I mean, it's usable, which I didn't think was true on the R3. Battery life, which we haven't touched on, seems even better on the R1. I'm not sure why. Literally, I shot one gymnastics event, 5,000 images, and I went to my next event to shoot, and the battery showed full after 5,000 images. And I'm like, that can't be right. So I sent a text message to my contact at Canon and said, yeah, I just shot 5,000 images. How could it be full? And he goes, well, did you look at the viewfinder a lot? I go, no. He goes, I could be right. And I think that's crazy.
How was it on the R5?
I never ran out of battery on the R5. Yeah, no, I never ran out of battery on the R5 Mark II on either camera. I used them like for an entire event and still never ran out of batteries on either one of them. Now, I didn't put 8,000 images a day on the R5 II. There were times I did that on the R1. But I mean, I rarely change batteries. So they both do very, very well. And when they give the specs of like, oh, you get 350 shots on R5 II on a battery, that's because they have to go by that standard, which is you're shooting and you're looking at every image and you're showing your friend on the LCD and then you're going back. Like I find on a typical R5, not the R5 II, on R5 or R6 II, I can shoot thousands of images on battery. So, but the R1 is definitely an improvement. I think it's a flagship in that it has the features that are top notch, like even above the R5 II, right? It does some things like the dual CF Express. It does focus a little bit faster. It was my go-to camera for the entire Olympics for a reason. So I would argue, yes, it's definitely top of the line. And it is, to me, again, worth the money. Will I sell my R3? You'll see the R3 for sale on my blog the minute the R1 gets in my hands. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So again, we're going to focus on photos, not video on this one, but for the R1, 24 megapixel stacked sensor. A lot of stuff is going to be the same as the R5 Mark II, the dual pixel autofocus. It's got action priority. It's got the eye control. It's going to be interesting to see if they add in firmware eye control improvements to the R3, because having an R5 series and an R1 series that have killer eye control and the R3 in the middle not having it, I think they've got to do something in firmware. They both, again, up to 8.5 stops.
Yeah, I think it's hardware, though. I don't think it's firmware.
Oh, do you?
I think it's hardware. I do. Yeah, they changed some things in the hardware, and I think that's what makes a difference.
Well, they have the accelerator, the Digic accelerator. I know that now, so that could be part of it as well.
No, I don't think that's part of it. I think they've done something in the actual view, in the eyepiece,
right?
To that's more sensing of your eye, I
Oh,
believe.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, you know what? I think I did. I did hear. I think in the petapixel video they were talking about the fact that it senses more points. So if that's the case, they're not. That's going to be an interesting scenario though, where the 5 series is better in many ways than
Well, here's the thing though. But
some of the R3 features.
If someone says to me, should I buy an R3? And I've said this for the last 6 months, no, because we knew the R1 was coming.
Right.
Yeah,
but honestly, there's a $1,300 cost difference. The R3 is $5,000. The R1 is $6,300.
If you're spending that kind of money, spend the extra and get the best. That's my philosophy. I mean, again, if you're spending $5,000 versus $6,000, spend the $6,000, right, and get the best, and get the dual CF Express, and get all the new features of the R1. I think honestly, I'm not saying that $6,000 is chump change. I mean, it's a significant cost, but it's like if I'm going to buy the car that's $50,000 or the car that's $55,000,
right?
If I'm going to spend that kind of money, I might as well just get the extra features within reason. And so I think the R3 is now stale. I mean that comparatively, with now that we know the R1 is coming. And so now, if the R3 is half the price of an R1, maybe you could make that argument. But honestly, I'd recommend getting an R5 II instead of an R3, because right, it has the newer focus and eye control and pre-capture and all that stuff. Why would you want to get an R3?
Yeah, and the R3 right now you can get for $4,500 on sale. So I'd buy the R5
II, right?
Yeah, I'd buy the R5 Mark II.
Yeah, I mean R5 II, you get more resolution, you get all the new features, and both cameras are CF Express and SD, so it's not like you're gonna have the buffer being any better there. I would just go with an R5 II.
So the R1 has the dual pixel AF, action priority, eye control, 8.5 stops of IS, the subject priority of 10 subjects, cross type dual pixel AF, Wi-Fi 6E, focusing down to minus 7.5 EV for photo. Video again is minus 5.5. The in-camera upscaling is different. Instead of 179 megapixels on the R5 Mark II, it's 96 megapixels. Again, I wouldn't use that at all. The electronic shutter is faster. They're both 12 frames per second mechanical, but it's 30 frames per second electronic on the R5 Mark II, 40 frames per second electronic on the R1. Pre-burst changes, this was interesting to me. It's a half a second no matter what, but because the R1 is faster, the R5 Mark II gives you 15 frames of pre-burst, whereas the R1 gives you 20 frames of pre-burst. That's cool. You mentioned,
it's cool, but
it's minor, but it's there.
Yeah, but if you're the fact that you're going back half a second, you should be able to get it with 15 versus 20, right? I mean, again, take a bird in flight. You should get that bird in flight regardless. So I think that's splitting hairs a bit.
Okay. Yeah. 2 CF Express Type B slots. This one has wired Ethernet. Did you use that at all, or did you transfer everything by pulling the card?
So I'm a one-man show. When I'm at the Olympics, I do everything, right? I'm shooting, downloading, culling, editing, delivering, and moving. So a lot of guys that are shooting there, if you're shooting for one of the agencies, all you do is shoot, and you're connected through Ethernet, and you do a voice annotation of it. This is Alex Bowen for Team USA second period goal, right? And then it goes off to their editor, and they're Ethernet connected. So a lot of the guys there were Ethernet connected. I'm not. I don't even use the wireless. It's cool that it has wireless, the Wi-Fi 6 and everything. I'll never use it. So there's certain things I don't even touch.
Right.
And it's funny when you talk about a lot of the cross sensor focusing on, like, I don't even care about that. All I care about, does it work, and does it work better? Right. So it's interesting to see all the specs, and people talk about, well, this one does this, and this lens, all I care about, does it work, and does it work well? Right. And so I don't use every feature of these. I didn't use the built-in Ethernet. There's certain other things I didn't use, but what I did use made a massive difference, and that's what I care about.
So here's the question. Obviously, your overall impression of both cameras is good. Versus other brands, because people are comparing the R5 Mark. I keep saying 5D, by the way. So
I know I've done that too.
Yeah. Force of habit. It's a 5D Mark IV that's my webcam right now. The R5 Mark II, the R1, a lot of people are comparing the R5 Mark II constantly to the Nikon Z8, stuff like that. You're a Canon shooter like me. I've played with some other bodies. I just shot a whole workshop actually with a Nikon Z6, Z6 II. But two, I think it's the two, the newest one. Do you have any quick opinions on where these stack up in the photographic world?
Well, since I don't use, I mean, I only use Canon, and and the fact that I'm sponsored by them is irrelevant. And I tell people all the time to go on my photo tours. You don't need to be a Canon photographer to go with me on a photo tour, right? Because the most important feature of the camera is what's behind it, right? It's how we set the camera and how we use it and how we compose and what settings we're at, and that's all done on our brains. I will say this: I think that a lot of these newer cameras, whether it's Nikon, Sony, Canon, Olympus, whoever, that they've all come a long way. And mirrorless, people ask me all the time, like, why did I switch to mirrorless? I mean, mirrorless is a game changer to me, more than all these features we're talking about. Going from an SLR to mirrorless with the eye detection and everything else is game changing. So I think that they've all done an amazing job of adding all this tech to these cameras to make it that much more powerful for us and a better tool to use for us. The one thing I know that people have said to me is the one thing that these newer Canon cameras have that the others don't have is the eye control. I don't think anybody else has the eye control. And having used it and abused it like I did in Paris, it is pretty cool. It'd be interesting to see if the others try to follow suit on that. But I think other than that, I mean, I look at the amount of stabilization, the eye detection, and all those things. I think they all do a good job from what I hear. I still think Canon has better color. I think they have great lens selection, and it works for me. But it doesn't mean that that's the end all do all, because I don't use other cameras.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, for me as a Canon shooter, but I've shot a lot of different things, I do agree with you. I think Canon's native color out of camera specifically for skin tones is better. But let's be honest, you can make a sellable image, and that's subjective, obviously, but you can make a sellable image off almost any camera that you've got with you today. And I know people that make sellable images off their phone. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There is so much that can be done. So shoot what makes you happy. That's the main thing. The main reason I shoot Canon is it's more comfortable in my hand. Right. It's more logical to the way the controls work and menus work to me, but that's beside the point. So before we jump into these, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just saying that when I talk about Canon, I don't use Canon because they sponsor me. They sponsor me because I use the camera.
Right.
And if you look at the equipment, the memory cards I use, the tripods I use, the camera bags I use, everything, the website I use, I try to use the best. And then if I partnered it with them, it's because I've already used them. So, and I'm sure you have this. I have people that contact me all the time, like, hey, if you take this to the Olympics, we'll give you money, or we'll give you all the gear you want. And it's like, no, I mean, I use what I use for a reason. And so I think it's the best, but it's also what I'm used to. Like you said, it feels good in our hand. Trying to switch to a different user interface stuff, wow, really hard.
So before we jump into these images, we're going to run through these images and talk about their challenges. Right. And this is going to be a long show, everybody, so just keep watching. But before we jump into the photos, is there anything I didn't ask about on the R5 Mark II or the R1 that I should have?
I'm trying to think. I'm thinking there is, but I can't think of it. I think we've covered a lot. So,
okay,
no,
so
I think we're good.
Let's talk images, because I have to tell you,
all
I love this.
Yeah, that's what you're going to lead with. Is that one? So
that's what I'm going to lead with. Yeah,
it was actually my favorite moment of the Olympics, and this is the last day of the Olympics, and the men from USA Water Polo, who have not medaled in 16 years, I think it was, got a bronze medal. And when they won that medal, you would have thought they won the gold. They were so happy to have it. And for me, being the team photographer, knowing the guys, knowing their families, working with the team for as many years as I have, I get to celebrate that win with them, which is pretty cool. And honestly, most people don't get to wear a medal, right? Even if you at the Olympics, you don't get to wear a medal. Even I remember in Vancouver, we went to the Mint where they made the medals, and we wanted to take a picture. And they said, you can't put it on, you can hold it off to the side. You can't even hold it dead center. We don't allow that. So to be able to wear a medal and celebrate a medal with these guys is pretty awesome.
So this was a team member's medal they let you put on?
Yeah, actually, a couple of guys. I have numerous photos that a couple of guys gave me their medals to wear, and I had them with my photographer's vest on and my credentials and everything. And then and I took it all off, and Alex, I think it was Alex Bowen, gave me his to put on for this shot, or it might have been Ben. But yeah, pretty cool that they let me do that. And they're heavy.
Pretty amazing.
I mean, they're pretty cool. Yeah.
So let's get into some photos that you actually took, and they're labeled down below. This one is with a Canon R1. So this particular shot, challenges, anything that stood out to you for capturing this?
Well, the interesting thing was I needed to shoot this again contractually. And the problem was I got into a good photo position to shoot, and then I got blocked by the cameraman, and everybody else came through, and the judges, and they all kind of got in front of me, and I was like, oh my God, I can't even shoot here. So I had to quickly move to a different location. And in that location, I had the video lights behind me from the press. And I thought, well, I kind of like that. So I shot this at f2.8 to blur everything else, except for the athlete. And, this shot to me was great. Again, the focus was dead on his face. I didn't even have to worry about the focus. But I'm waiting for that key reaction. And so the reaction here is what makes this photo great. When he knew on his first shot put, he knew he won gold. And that was that reaction.
So what's interesting, and as we go through these, I'm going to say this now, and it fits every damn shot that I'm going to show. And that is what makes these shots so that much above everybody else's shots to me, is your, I think I've told this to you before, but I may not have. And if I haven't, I should have. Your sense of composition is unparalleled to me. The way that you got both names down in the bottom, corner, the USA and his name, the way that you crop and compose your images is absolutely amazing. Here's your volleyball shot. This is the one that you printed large and enlarged, and you've got the print in the room behind you because you showed me before we went live. Challenges?
Challenge edition. Well, a couple things. I had a couple challenges. One, the first time I was at this venue, I couldn't get dead center. I was off by a little bit. And I posted the image, and someone goes, it looks a little distorted. It didn't look like you were dead center. I'm like, I wasn't. There were too many photographers trying to get the shot. I went back about a week later, and we had an even better sunset. The challenge here was they didn't light the Eiffel Tower until 10 p.m. Sunset was very late there. I think this was at 9. Actually, they lit it at like 9:45 or 9:30, but it didn't show lit until closer to 10. So it was hard to wait for that perfect sunset color, but also get the Eiffel Tower lit. The other challenge with this shot, two things, was how wide to shoot. I went with a 15 to 35. I believe I was at 15 millimeters for this shot. But how to meter? Because if I metered for the volleyball court at the bottom, then everything else went too dark. And if I metered for the sky, then the volleyball court got too bright. So what I did is I metered in the stands kind of behind the court there in front of the Eiffel Tower, because that was kind of what I felt to be kind of a mid-level meter reading. And then I shot this knowing that I would have to darken the foreground in Photoshop and brighten the background in Photoshop. So I did some little tweaking to it in Photoshop to get what I wanted. I also went through with a brush and kind of brightened the Eiffel Tower a little bit to bring it out. And so it was a little bit of tweaking. I knew when I shot it what I would have to do, but it was trying to get that all balanced to get what I wanted. I knew even before I went to Paris, I saw the placement of this venue and I thought, this is the shot. I even said this on NBC when they interviewed me. This is the one shot I want. This is the shot that defines the Olympics.
And then here's another shot of volleyball. I love this shot. Just again, your composition, you've got the rings in the background, everything about it. Volleyball was fun to shoot.
It was fun to shoot. It's funny because at beach volleyball, which this was, I was so enamored with the shot we just showed you that I kept kind of sitting up there to get the wide shot. Luckily, USA started their game at 10 p.m. so I could get the sunset shot and then run down onto the deck to get this. And yes, as you mentioned, whenever I shoot Olympics, I try to include the rings because it tells where I am. If you didn't have the rings in this shot, you don't see any rings on the ball or on her, what she's wearing, so you wouldn't know it's Olympics. So it's important to get that. This is a great example of that pre-capture, because I really wanted them diving down, because if they're just, hitting the ball, it wasn't as exciting. So I'd wait for the dive, and then that pre-capture was amazing because they would do the dive, and then I'd hit down, and I know go back and get this shot with the ball right on her hands. And this was the first sport where I thought, wow, this makes a huge difference.
And you got the sand coming up from the legs. You got the frame. Yeah, just so good. And here's again, the composition, the rings, the moment, so much right here. This one being an R1 shot, phenomenal shot.
Yeah, this is just this is during practice for the diving, which happened to be in the same venue as the water polo. So I had some downtime, either I forget it was before game, after game, and they're practicing. So I just sat there dead center on the rings, framed for the rings, and waited for them to come. And as soon as I saw anybody jump or on the diving board where they might come into frame on the rings, it was just hammer the shutter and see what I got and just wait for them to be in there.
Here you got this the equestrian actually, with the blur. I love this.
Yeah, so you had mentioned that the blackout free on these newer cameras. And for motion panning in the past with the R6, R6 II, R5, it was a problem doing motion panning because when it would black out, it was hard to then track. So I found it much easier to track athletes. This was shot at 30th of a second, if I remember correctly, or maybe 20th of a second.
Really?
Yep. Yeah, really hard to do because I'm trying to keep the lens. I believe I shot with the 100 to 500 on that shot, and I was just trying to hold that all the way out at 500 millimeters at 20th of a second, and trying to move the exact same rate with the horse to try to get that. And in the full resolution shot, that both the face of the rider and the horse is just tack sharp.
So gorgeous, so gorgeous. This one is wild. I love this. Again, you got the Paris 2024, you got the rings, and you got the water splashing, and yet what you need in focus is in focus. This, to me, is a perfect shot that would show an example of both your skill as a photographer and what the gear is capable of when you've got lots of things that could pull focus away from you.
Yeah, so this one was interesting. It took me a long time to get this one shot. I knew that this was the shot I wanted. This is kayak cross, where they actually go against each other. It's like bumper cars. It's really funny to watch them come down. But when they come down, they dump them. All four of them come off a slide, and they just get dumped into the water. But, inevitably, one boat would be behind the others, so it'd go in a different time, or one would be off center. So it took me a long time to get all four. Because what I really love about the shot is the arc of the splash off of each of the boats is a beautiful kind of, I don't know how to explain it, but like a beautiful arc of wave of water going off of each of them. And in this particular shot, you could also see which country they're from on their paddles. So it took hundreds and hundreds of shots to get the one I wanted. And once I got this in the camera, I thought, okay, good. Now I'll go down the rest of the river and get some action shots of them going down. But it took that long to get this one. But yes, it is a testament to having the focus. I would track the boats as they got dumped in and just hoped I could nail it. And I did shoot, obviously, straight on so I could get Paris 2024 and those rings in the shot.
Yeah, so well done. Again, this is the perfect example of the moment. You got the player falling, the ball's up in the air, the ball is not intersecting any of the players. Oh my God, the perfect moment. The face on the player behind the ball, realizing the ball is up in the air, the hair up in the air for the player that had the ball, arms still folded as though they were holding it in their right arm. There's so much going on here. Again, these shots, like this one actually to me is another great example of a shot. Actually, both of these skate shots, this one and then this one. And for those of you on audio, these are shots of skateboarding.
In the rings, yeah.
And the rings. And these are shots that are perfect examples to me of your photographic vision, the Jeff Cable photographic voice. And then you get to this one, which you mentioned earlier. Now, this one is brilliant.
Yeah, I was very happy. This is one of my favorite shots. I mean, for a lot of reasons. One is Simone Biles, right? The GOAT. But, you know, she's laid out almost perfectly flat. The focus on her eyes, and this is one that I did actually up-res using Topaz because I like it so much. But, you know, this is honestly a testament to the R1 that it was able to grab her eyes and get them in focus, because I can tell you that it is really hard as a photographer to lock in on that. And to get, I don't think I could have gotten this shot without the R1, which says a lot.
The fact that you are not straight on to her, had you been straight on, it would have been amazingly powerful because you still have the eye in focus, the parallel bar even. But the fact that you can see down the side of her body all the way to her heel gives that depth perception in a scene that's completely dark in the background, that you would lose that perception of you know, the Z axis. Just so well done.
Yeah, and I will say, going back, this is where sometimes luck is involved. And, you know, I did try to position myself everywhere I went. I tried to position myself for the rings, or to do, I photographed Simone numerous times and at the beam. And when I went for the second time, I ended up in the same spot. And I thought, I don't want the same spot. I want something different. So I am consciously moving, but you're right. In this shot, it really worked, and that's just luck. I wish I could tell you I planned that. That's just the way it was.
It still is so good. This shot of her kind of flying, again, arched her back so that you can see the feet. You also got the pole that's holding up the parallel bar with the 2024 on it. You know how many photographers, even at your level, would miss that?
Yeah, that was planned. I'm very conscious at the Olympics to include as much logo or rings or anything to tell where I am. Or sometimes it's even the colors. I remember in London, they used a lot of the purples and blues, like that was their theme color. So I try to include that. But yes, I mean, I always tell people, regardless of what I'm shooting, the idea is to tell the story. And if you don't have that 2024 in there, you kind of lose where this was taken. And that's really key.
Yeah, it could be any meat at that point. And then, of course, here's your bread and butter with the water polo. And this is one of those shots, again, where, like you were talking about earlier, you don't have a whole body, you have caps on, you've got water splashing, and all three of the shots that I have of water polo, you know, here with the trailing of the water and the player up in the air, you see somebody in the back. Again, you've got rings in the back here. And then there's that goalie shot. And by the way, I was a water polo goalie in high school, so this one is near and dear to my heart. But your ability to shoot these, where I can tell you, and our mutual friend, by the way, Scott Heath, shoots water polo because his kid plays water polo. I can tell you that these are, or I would assume at this level, difficult captures, and yet these cameras captured these. How much of that is that new tech?
Well, go back one shot to the trail of the water. This is one of my favorite images. So what I'm doing here, this is a penalty shot, and I am hopefully jumping the camera up to a faster frame rate. And when I have this much of them, I could generally use eye detection because they're straight onto me, and I will use that. And that definitely worked in this case. I love the arc of the water. That just kind of, again, was kind of lucky, even though I changed the camera settings to try to get this type of shot. And if you move now to the forward to the next one with the goaltender with Ashley, this one here, what I typically will do for water polo is I'm watching the shot clock. So when the shot clock gets down to 5 or 4, I know that ball is going to come. So what I'll do is I'll then pre-focus the camera on the goaltender, either using center point focus if I can't achieve focus otherwise, or I'll use the eye detection. In this case, I believe I did use eye detection for it. And again, I'm framing to include the Paris 2024 and the Olympic rings in the goal. And then I'm just waiting for that shot to come. And I hope, my hope is that Ashley stops it, but also that I got a shot that shows she's going to stop it, which this one does, right? Her hand's right there in position. And so it's pretty much a surefire that she stopped that. And so, again, telling the story. So part of it's the camera doing what it needs to do, and part of it is me knowing the sport, understanding the best way to try to capture that in one shot, and to show her abilities. Remember, she's kicking herself into that position. Well, know this, having played goalie. That is no easy task. I mean, that's high.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, we used to, when I played water polo doing egg beater, the whole thing was how long can you hold yourself out of the water to your knees. Um, it's an amazing thing when it's done beautifully like this. So I
She's
would be
unbelievable. Yeah.
remiss if we didn't at least do a quick, before we close out, a quick thing on, you shot a couple of new lenses. What did you think of the new glass?
So the two new lenses, the one I relied on absolutely the most was the Canon 100 to 300 2.8. When they first announced that lens, I thought, man, that's an expensive lens to get an extra 100 millimeters, right? I use a 70
Right.
to 200 all the time. But I will tell you that using that lens, it's so fast in focusing. So when I talk about the R1, the R5 II doing well, it didn't hurt that I was using that lens on it. But I pretty much lived on that 1 to 3. Sometimes I put a 1.4 or even a 2x tele adapter on it. But most time I was, I used to take the 200 to 400 EF lens with me to all past Olympics. Didn't even bring it. I used the 1 to 3 for everything, and it was phenomenal. That was my go-to lens for any long shot, other than equestrian. When I was kind of taking the day off, giving my back a little bit of a break, and I went to 100 to 500 just to lighten the load a little bit. The other lens that I use, I know we didn't see any of the images from that lens, and that is the Canon RF 10 to 20, which I'd never even used before. It's a super wide angle with very little distortion, and it's lightweight and small. It ain't cheap. It's like $2,600, I think, but I really like that lens. It was really cool for shooting some of the super wide shots that I had done. And I remember the blog I pushed this morning has some of the super wide shots I'd done when walking around Paris, the La Défense area. It was a cool lens, and I probably will buy one if I can justify it. I don't do a ton of super wide shooting. If you shoot real estate or anything like that, you got to have that lens. It was really cool.
Right. See, and I love the 15 to 35, but there are times I wish I could go a little bit more fisheye, but without that fisheye distortion. So that would be fantastic.
See, I
like
it. So, I use the 15 to 35 all the time. Like when I shoot events,
lens.
I live on that lens. And I do use a fisheye sometimes, but you get the distortion. The 10 to 20, it kind of gives you that super wide with a lot less distortion. Doesn't give you the fisheye, bend to everything.
Right.
I was blown away. It was a really cool lens.
So let's switch gears to close out, and we're going to do these really quick. This is the speed round. I ask a question. You try and give the fastest answer that comes to your mind.
All right.
Your top photography tip.
Be ready for anything.
Oh, okay. I don't think anybody's ever said that one. That's a good one. Biggest photo mistake that you've made or almost made?
Biggest mistake I've ever made was when I first started using back button focus, and I forgot that I had changed it and I didn't have focus on the shutter button. And it was a key moment, and I went to shoot it, and it was like, I'm not talking a little bit out of focus. I'm talking 3 feet out of focus, like garbage.
Right.
And it was a key moment. Yeah, that was many, many years ago, but I'll never forget it.
Favorite band or performer?
I like Shinedown. They're not the biggest band, but they're still one of my favorites.
Super nice guys. I met them once because they were in town, and they're used to listen to our radio station, so they came and talked to our radio station. It was fantastic and phenomenal to shoot, by the way. Favorite drink?
Well,
we did this before. Don't do the peanut butter whiskey again. Okay, Diet Coke.
No, the Diet Coke. Actually, I haven't done
Coke.
much of the peanut butter whiskey post-COVID. Favorite, honestly, lately it's been gin and diet tonic because it's no carbs, and I've been trying to keep my weight down. So let's go with that. Or here's another one for you that'll throw you a loop, kind of like the peanut butter whiskey. The pre-made margaritas from Costco mixed with Fresca.
Oh, you're freaking me out, man. He's the reason I went and tried Screwball whiskey, which is peanut butter whiskey. We were in Hawaii, and I saw it, and I went, okay, Jeff mentioned this. I got to try it. It's actually not bad, but I'm a big whiskey fan. Favorite movie?
If you're a purist, you won't be. But I'm telling you, the margarita and Fresca, I do an annual party at my house, and I serve it, and I got everybody hooked on it.
Favorite movie or TV show?
Favorite show, it's not TV, it was Netflix, but I really liked Ozark. It was something I really liked. I don't really favorite movie, going way back, maybe Forrest Gump, because it was just so different and really unique. But
just watched it the other
new.
night. It's damn near Forrest Gump is damn near a perfect movie. And I'm going to do a movie pick really quick. I had not heard of this. Normally when a new movie comes out, I see a commercial or a trailer on YouTube accidentally or something. Hadn't heard of this at all. It's with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and it's called Greedy People. It's brand new. Go find it. It's quirky. It's weird. It's unpredictable. It'll be listed as a comedy. It's got parts that are far from being a comedy. I kept thinking, if Quentin Tarantino made a Wes Anderson movie, this is what you would get. It's, again, called Greedy People. So last question. Is there a photographer out there that you think more people should know about?
Oh, God. At the Olympics, I will tell you, like, you've been very nice and complimentary of my work. I will tell you, if you ever want to be humbled, go to the Olympics, because there's so many people there that I think outshoot me 10-1. And I look at that and go, God, like, some of that stuff is just incredible. But there's so many people, honestly, that I've been inspired by, that just, I don't know. I mean, there's too many to even name. I told you last time that guy, Chris McLennan, who's in
I had him on the show.
He's amazing. Oh, good. Because he's an amazing photographer. But like, there's a guy, Ian, who is from Scotland, that I see at the Olympics, and I see his stuff is swimming in. It's just, I mean, he's an amazing sports photographer. I mean, there's so many people where I look at their work and think, oh, I suck. Like I said, you probably have this too, right? You look at other people's work and think, I'm not even worthy to be on your show.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to take my camera out. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I have that all the time.
Ian, the Ian guy you mentioned, do you know his last name?
Why am I blanking on it? Please hold. I will tell you in a second. This is not good.
Here comes the hold music.
Oh, God.
I'll narrate. Jeff Cable is now pulling out
Ian McNichol.
Ian McNichol. All right. Send me that link. Send me that link when you get to
it. And you can't see it because it won't meter.
Yeah, it won't meter.
His stuff is really good. He's very good sports photographer. And the funny thing is, we talked before the Olympics. Are you going? Yeah, I'm going, blah, blah, blah. I saw him one time through my lens across the pool. When Katie Ledecky was in the pool, I was there. He was there. And I saw him, and I sent him a WhatsApp message. I see you. And then I don't even think he replied because we were both busy. Never saw him again. Because the Olympics, there's 2,200 of us there. So it's quite often that I don't run into this person at all. It's crazy.
Well, I will put links in the blog post. Jeff, if people want to find you, Facebook is Jeff Cable Photo, at Jeff Cable Photo. Instagram is Jeff Cable Photography. Twitter is jcable12. And your website, Jeff Cable. Any other links they should know about? Obviously, you're on YouTube. You've got your blog.
Yeah, I mean, the blog is linked from my page, but blog.jeffcable.com. Yeah, and I try to, from the Olympics, I was blogging twice a day. It's funny, when we first started talking, today, we were talking about, the 15-minute deadline and all that. But, not only was I trying to shoot multiple sports per day and deliver on time, but I was trying to write 2 blogs a day, and those take me a couple hours to write. So, hence the really crazy long days. But the blog, I was blogging twice a day. Normally I blog, once a week or so.
Right. Well, check out his blog, check out his website, follow him everywhere that you can. And as always, my friend, A, it's great to see you, and I'm glad that you had fun at the Olympics. And B, I hope I see you again soon. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
I hope we do. Thank you.
To everybody, make sure you follow Jeff Cable. Again, you can find all his links, his blog, his workshops. Don't forget his workshops. You can find all of those at jeffcable.com. If you want to see the blog post and the bit that I wrote about Jeff or any links, those are in the show notes over at behindtheshot.tv. You can also follow me. It's stevebrazill.com. That makes it a little easier for you. And of course, if you're on YouTube, please make sure that you hit the subscribe button, the bell. All the links are down in the description on YouTube as well. Thank you again, as always, to my guest, Jeff Cable, one of the nicest guys you will ever meet in this business. And by the way, if you're ever at a photo conference like WPPI, you'll see him walking around. Make sure you go up and say hi to him. Make sure you join us next time as we try and get inside the mind of a great photographer by taking a closer look behind the shot.